Morning, Narendra.
Morning, Roshan. How are you?
I'm very good. So, thanks for being part of this show. So, let me let me start by telling the audience why we have chosen this topic. Those were the days surviving the tech storm. So let's understand. Let me give a few examples. So let's say we see kids coming to us and saying, "Dad, I need your advice. Mom, I need your advice." Or we run to our bosses and say, "Sir, madam, I need your advice." Or we might go to a teacher and say, "I need your advice." Now, these are, statements which we often hear every time, right? But what is important is to understand, you know, why do we look up at these seniors, at the senior professionals, at this industry leaders for advice and guidance? We need to understand their journey, right? So we all read a lot of autobiographies and we want to learn about great men. But those great men didn't become great just because they were well known. They had a journey behind that, and we all want to read about their journey. And I think the reason why we're having this conversation is to understand the journey of senior professionals like you. So what I want to start with is the one thing which has taken the industry by storm. There was a revolution which happened in the 1990s, uh, around 1995, 96, when the internet was commercialized. So, in the industry professionals like you and me, who were used to working in a different culture, had to have a paradigm shift. Now, I want to, and we have all survived, right? Here we are sitting, you and me sitting, having this discussion over a technology like Teams, discussing. You are in a different city, I am in a different city, and we're talking. So we have adapted to change. So I think let's start from there. So instead of I giving an introduction, what I want to do is I want you to, start by giving an introduction about yourself, and
Mhm.
then we'll move on from there.
Okay, I think, Roshan, you are putting me on a spot. One is you use the word senior people. So I would want to use a filter here. Let's not use the word senior. We can always say experienced people. That gives more, logic to this session. But at the same time, this gives us also a, first cut impression to whoever is listening to us. Is that, like you said, we are still surviving and existing. And obviously, we have grown along with the industry. Yes, thanks for taking us, erstwhile days, way back in 1980s. That is where I graduated from my college and then took up my first job in one of the oil companies in India. Obviously, those days when I joined the company, I would say close to around end 70s. The major, vendor used to be IBM with all those, mainframe computers, the IBM 1401s, and then those large printers, 1403s. I'm just giving a few, words so that people can, correlate if at all they want to go back and figure out. And IBM used to be here, but then it was, even the technology was in, probably I would use the word, in the industry revolution two, between two and three. I'll talk about the industry revolution also. Now then it was applicable more to say utility companies. There were hardly few. Then a few of the banks. Again, there were hardly few. Governments, were still using it for the obvious reason. But then those days, when the computers were there, it needed, more of, processing powers, data repositories, and then of course, some amount of compute. And then in close to around end 70s, IBM called it off and they exited from India. I'm talking about India particularly because that is where I come from. And then came the third party maintenance companies. The initial companies were there. And obviously, when IBM left, there was some legacy set behind that there's something out of the computer which can also be first of all supported for the existing customers and all that. So that is where the start was. So my first job, it was one of the oil companies, oil, they used to have rigs and all. And then my first job was, I would say data center, operator. Now, obviously, those days the typical jobs were either you are a data entry operator or a data center operator, or you're a data center manager. And then obviously you had some amount of software programmers. Again, if I'm talking those days, the programmers used to be more on the COBOL and Fortrons and Pascals and all, which were only meant for certain processes or for a certain business vertical line or business lines. But then it was all about data processing and and computing itself. So I used to get fascinated. First of all, my first job. I'm out of the college into an oil company, and that too a massive data center with almost 10 huge computers, which were as big as a refrigerator size. And needless to say that those days your 16 kilobyte of memory used to be as big as a large refrigerator. Yeah, so when you go into those data centers, you sit across those 15 to 16. Some has a compute, some has memory, some had a lot of power. And then if you want to have I would say 32 kilobytes of memory, then you have two refrigerators sitting over there, and those are all core memories. So I used to get fascinated, and then comes, because I'm working for oil company, I'm data center operator. What is it then the data center? Because machines are running, and what are they supposed to do? Guess what? We were able to see on the large screen, some numbers ticking into every 1 minute, every 30 seconds, and I used to wonder, what is this data? Where is the data coming from? This man, our data center manager, is sitting there. He's just watching those 5 or 6 large screens. That too. So I realized that, okay, this data is coming in from some source through the satellite communication established, and then there were RTUs, or the remote terminal units, which were so-called mounted onto those gas pipelines, oil pipelines, whatever those were. If you compare in today's world, we call it as IoT, but then those days these were RTUs, and they used send some message, whatever that message could be, but not in the volume and not in as dynamic as it is today. So, but then it was, I was just reactive to that, and I was just helping, the so-called data center manager in, taking care of the large mainframe computers, helping them print those, reports, what they want to do. And in case there are some failures there, I just look at those red and green lights, and then pass the message to my line manager, and for him to call the third-party companies. I worked there for almost 11 months, and then I realized, man, while I'm fascinated, I come from the engineering background. I don't want to do just viewing, and I just don't want to do this. But yes, not a bad job or something, but then that is not me, right? So I said, okay, let me, who's doing maintenance of that. So I joined one of the maintenance companies who were actually maintaining the systems for them, because probably I demonstrated myself whenever their engineers used to come. I used to be sitting along with them, looking at what they are doing, how they are doing, if there's a breakdown. Because those days hardware was more an issue than the software, because software was only limited, doing something limited function. But majorly it was all technology or hardware I would use. So my first job profile was hardware engineer, and I am still proud of that, because that is what is made me today what I am. I joined the third-party maintenance company. I'll not mention names because not to put them down, but then at the same time talking about experience, right? Then
Yeah.
the reality came in. When I was set, I thought they would only put me in a particular customer or in a particular mainframe. They said, my dear friend, you are a third-party maintenance company systems engineer now. I'll have to go to maybe 6 different customers in different vertical lines, right? So guess what? I was going into a manufacturing unit. I went into a banking customer also, but doing actual maintenance work. What does that mean? And there were a lot of failures those days. Power was, not consistent. There used to be power failure, and then system used to collapse, and then because of the hardware was still, not that as, I would say robust today, but those days failures could also, spoil certain components, certain parts of the computers. So our job was to go and, fix it. And those fixings are not just, I would say field replacement units. Those were called as component replacement. And our job was to really go out and go with those huge, schematic diagrams. We used to have oscilloscopes, and then, if we detect a failure, whatever that failure could be, then we have to diagnose those. We used to have diagnostic tapes and, get those done. So this is how, that fascination, got into, doing things in a more, I would say, in a creative manner and thought. There's a lot of imagination, we used to have while we were doing the engineering college, but then here I'm getting to, actually experience, and there were times, when the hardware failures were there. I have worked, sometimes 36 hours at a stretch and 48 hours at a stretch, not because I was incompetent, but then those days troubleshooting, first of all, diagnosis. It used to be a software diagnosis, then troubleshooting the whole thing, then so-called fixing the things at a component level. I used to even repair, replace ICs in the microprocessors also. Those were the days. And then the logistics used to be issue, because today you have the WhatsApp and all those things. Those days, my help desk you would, if I have a phone at home, he would call me at home. If I don't have a phone, he would send a dispatcher to my home saying, Narendra, there's a problem with the utility company. There's a huge failure. And then, I take a cab, go there. First of all, identify what the problem is, diagnose what the problem is. I'm supposed to have diagnostics tools in my toolkit. The toolkit used to be our, I would say, the so-called Bible for us, and we used to respect the toolkit like anyone else respect the tool. So this is how the, journey was. But then I think that was the system then. Very limited customers, limited technologies, right? But a sense of satisfaction used to be there. Yes, after 36 hours when I come home, of course, I used to battle with my wife, but then this is what I am. You're married an engineer, and then this is what it is. So again, long story short, I would say, that created for me to step into, so-called my future, my career, and my aspirations, and those were, because we come from those times. There was not too much of, glitter and glamour what it is today, for the right reasons. But then, so those were the things available. Yes, development and research was happening, and then India became one of the early adopters and even contributors to those developments. That is how we evolved, or how the world has evolved thing itself. And then if I have to, correlate, where we stand today, I'll have to take you back. I'll probably, take maybe a few minutes more, so that, I give you some perspective as to how things have unfolded. So there are those 5 or 6 typical jargons, which we will hear, or which we'll see, or which we'll experience, and which is also factual as well. So you have these 4 industry revolutions, right? So till Industry Revolution 3, no one knew there was something called as Industry Revolution. It was then, evolution which was happening. And then when, the smart people came, intelligent people came, they said, okay, how do we, differentiate between what happened then and what is happening now? So you have this industry revolutions, where you have steam engine, which was probably early 1800s or 1900s. Then you have the, industry revolution 2, which talks about now electricity coming in. Industry revolution 3, which brings in a lot of, electronics and communication taking place. And industry revolution 4, which is where we are today. We are talking to each other. We are, I would say, users and consumers, or misusers, whatever you can call it as the users. We are sitting at the Industry Revolution 4. Yeah, obviously, it has not happened without technology also, evolving in different shapes and forms, whether it be telecommunication. We started with, maybe 2G when we were born. 1G, of course, we were never there part of the 1G, but 2G, whenever when I was born, at least I knew there's something called a telephone. I didn't have the telephone at my home, but my neighbor had. But then the achievement of having a telephone. See, those were the days where the moment if someone has a phone, I also want a phone. Now, if I were to see today, this all things started not because he has it, I want it, because it's not there in existence, and it's facilitating something or the other. So we are talking about telecommunication, right? And then obviously telecommunication coming in over what is it, triggering to I would say the technologies. You talk about the 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. Yeah. And again, we are in the race between now 4G and 5G. In fact, I would say from 5G to 6G. Today, when we are seeing us each other so clear and crisp, it is the result of the 4G technology, which is allowing streaming video to go back forth, with no break, flawless, and absolutely seamless. So that was the telecommunication part. Um, if we go into the software side, like I said, in the beginning days, it was just those, simple programs, using Fortran or a COBOL or a Pascal. Of course, there were a few more. I cannot even recall those names, not because of my age, because now we are overwhelmed with so much technology, you tend to lose those things. But then that is how the evolution started. Today, we are into the Web 3, if I were to say that, and then we are talking about Web 2. Where does this come from? It comes from, like you mentioned, the internet coming in the 90s or 95 and all. But then how does, how do we communicate with each other? So this is where the advent happened. And computers also, like I said, when I started as mainframes, around till say around 92 to 93, I was more onto managing and maintaining frameworks. But then came the mini computers. Then came the network operating system. You had the novel network. We had the Windows 3.11. As if I remember right, that was the first of the network operating system. So then came the world of Ethernet, and then networking and all. So we have, I would say we are lucky few that we are coming in from those days into this. Yes, whoever is watching it today, if he's sitting in a 5G environment, if he's sitting in a fourth revolution, and if he's sitting on a Web 3, if he's sitting on a 5G, there's a good job he or she has to do. And obviously, they will have their own, evolution and revolution coming in over here, and they have to keep pace with those. But then at least the accessibility is there in a lot in the current, to the current generation or the millennials, unlike what we had, because those days it's evolving. Today it's evolved, your and my children, they were born with mobiles around them. I will, won't be surprised that, when you saw your child born, instead of giving him a first kiss, you took his first picture. Using what?
Sure.
Using a mobile. So nothing wrong. So if children are, if today's generation is, sitting that is where how they were born. Unlike us, when we were born, we were just born with people around us, which was our immediate family. We had that little TV. Even TV, I wouldn't say it was there available till early 80s. Yes, late 80s, we started to have TVs at home. Probably every one had TV at home, but then it was not there. So we just grew up, with the family, the culture, the values, and those days, if you are a bachelor of arts or bachelor of commerce, you were appreciated probably throughout your community, throughout your society itself. And then gradually, over time, when people realize, okay, there is something called as electrical engineering, there is something called as electronic engineering, there is something called as telecommunication engineering, and that's how these streams came in, and people wanted to go there. So again, it's a mix of everything. If I were to sum up my initial beginning until date, but then especially the more emphasis was, I'm talking about the pre to year 2000.
So I picked up certain things from your initial opening statement. One was your character strengths of curiosity, your character strength of learning, your character strength of saying, I want to grow, your character strength of, uh, I want to adapt to change, right? So that brings up my next question to you. Okay, do you think you embrace change with a firm outlook towards the future, or you said, let me go along with the tide? Obviously, you have this character strengths, but a little bit more, would help the viewers understand your journey.
See, I think I would say it's a combination of both. One is wanting to change because we started to realize, things are now happening. Like I said, if today's generation, everything is there. I'm talking about I don't know what holds in future as the technology evolution. Yeah, we are talking about 6Gs and all those things, but then not to go there. When I was into, like I said, when my first job, if someone was maintaining that computers, what is it that it's applying? So one, if I have done my engineering, then I want to demonstrate my engineering, strength of what I have. Curiosity definitely was there. So, if I was managing, for example, I will give few customer names of mine. Citibank was one of my customers. When I say my customers, I used to manage a lot of mainframes of theirs. Reliance those days was, was one of my customers. I used to manage their infrastructure. In fact, I would brag upon, once Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, the man himself, early morning, 5 o'clock, I was fixing up one of the line printers of their machine because they had a board meeting. Of course, I had never seen the man himself, and I was, sitting in fixing in the line printer. And guess what? The line printer was again as big as our fridge. So while sitting, some gentleman comes, and he puts, hand on my shoulder. He says, "Gentlemen, how are you? Are you fixing, or you're breaking, or you're making?" So I just, look up him. He was sitting, standing above me, and he said, "Sir, I'm paid for fixing." So he said, "Good answer," And then he just went past, and then I was just doing. Of course, that no one would dream that at 5 o'clock someone is talking to me, and he could be the man himself. And then I was in the middle of, fixing things itself. So around a couple of hours later, when the actual data center operator came in, he said, "Naren, everything's fixed." I said, "Yes, it is fixed." I said, "There was some gentleman came at 5 o'clock fully suited." He says, "That's not gentleman. He was Dhirubhai Ambani himself." So at least I am, very happy and satisfied. Probably I was in my just fourth or fifth years of my career, and then the man. Of course, Reliance was not as big it is today, but then yes, it was still the case. So that curiosity helped me, get into you know things itself. And then every time I would hear, for example, when we talked about the network operating system coming in over here, so I wanted to do that because now mainframes became more, I would say expensive. It was not for everyone. And then because the so-called, mini computers came in, you had the operating systems, you had, where you can do things, on the local itself. Very few applications, you had that word star and you forgot the Excel sheet used to be the earlier
Lotus 123,
Lotus 123. So initial days,
Fortron.
exactly. So then what happened? The compute came into the hands of the user to do whatever that limited access he had, either in terms of application or those things. So my curiosity went in there as to what how the whole installing the networks or the machines around. Uh, uh, and again, the user interaction started to increase. Initial days, the first year when I was there, it was data center. So I'm not really access to any user. It used to be the data center manager, and the data center operators or data entry operators. But then now that when this network operating system came in over here, I started to interact with users because everyone had different problems. I will go there fix it because I'm from the engineering side. So that gave me two things. It gave me a lot of thrust in my own personality, my interpersonal skills, and then my diagnostics and troubleshooting skills, resolving certain problems in any shape and form. So there's a lot of resilience that got built in because those days again the machines we couldn't fix the machines in say half an hour, 30 minutes. It would take maybe a few hours for the obvious reasons of the logistics and the way things used to be failures. So if I have to answer this right, you know, like you said, the character strength is what probably has made me run throughout those 35 years plus. If you look at me today, I might not be looking at 35 years experience, but then yes, it was because of uh, doing both the things, adopting the change, but at the same time going with the flow also. And my current title, or not current title, current profile is actually talking about data and AI solutions. Now, guess what? Someone working in mainframes, 35 years back today, I have to talk that language. So it's a combination of both things.
Right. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But one thing which I think is very key to this conversation is an event which took place, and everybody was on their toes at that time. And people know it like as a Y2K problem or a year 2000 problem, right? And I think we were all there. So, do you recall any incident around that time, which probably, either something which you want to share?
I think it's a very good question uh, from two aspects. One, my career, I would say, shift and jump came in with this word called as Y2K. How? No, I was in India till say 1994. From 86 to 94, I was working in India. And then for whatever, family reasons and financial reasons, I had to take a call that, okay, let me explore the world. So, while doing that, there were two countries which I never thought I would make it. One was Saudi Arabia and one was the US. Yeah. Guess what? My first job, overseas job, came in as Saudi Arabia. And it
Okay.
was the job was a technical support manager for one of the dairy producing companies. I was there with them for 3 years. It was almost the same thing. So I from working in an end user environment, my first job, which was with the oil and gas. Then I switched into the third party maintenance company, and then worked there for almost 5 years. And then for 2 years, I worked with one of the global banks, which was based out in India, and helping them set up their network infrastructure. Those days, the band, I would say network bandwidth was not as easily available to a lot of people, and of course, not all customers were using the bandwidth. Because it was a global bank, that was the case. But then after 2 years of that, I said, okay, let me, explore the world, because the reasons were different for me to leave the country. So I land up over there, in Saudi Arabia, and then my job was to set up, I would say, end user environment for that dairy producing company in 22 different locations. So they had these, farms, I would say, but that is where the cows used to be. Then you had the plants, where that is where all the processing of milk and other dairy products used to happen. And then you had the sales depots, where all these, items, sorry, the goods were getting dispatched. Then, of course, you had uh, throughout the region. That region was purely, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries. So my job was to travel all this place. But then again, it was all limited to creating the whole network of users itself. WAN communication in Saudi Arabia was not as great those days as it is now today. So that was one evolution. But around so that was in say from 94 to 97, and then came the buzzword Y2K, because suddenly they realized, okay, what happens when the clock ticks into the next millennium or the century, right? So there was a lot of chaos across the globe. Not that we were going to be affected too much, but then how does it happen? So I think that is where not only my own career, but then whoever is listening to this video, especially from those days, they are the beneficiary of that so-called cult called as Y2K created, right? There was nothing of that sort. It was as seamless that when we woke up on the 1st January of 2000, Nothing happened. None of my applications, none of my, watches, the clocks, the calendars, they got fixed. But then, not to take away the, whatever would have gone behind whoever was doing it. But then, I wouldn't say it was hype, but it was kind of hype itself. But in that process, a lot of organizations, especially the Western world, they wanted resources who are, tech savvy, application, there's a lot of creativity itself, So then that is how a lot of people, especially in India, if I were to say, and of course from the other parts of the world also, got a chance to really, get involved in projects for a lot of US-based companies, either remotely, not that those days remote was the option. They would, travel, go there, fix up a lot of things for the for the vendor or the OEM or the developer itself. So yes, Y2K, and I was no exception. My own colleagues in Saudi Arabia, they were half of them they were from the MIS, half of them they were developers, half of them they were the engineers. They went there. He said, "Naren, what are you doing there, man? Your job is over here. Why don't you come over here?" I said, "Okay, please allow me to do that." So again, the same thing happened. Two countries I didn't want it to go, and then guess what? Within 3 months' time from Saudi, I was in US. So and again, when I went there, by then things kind of had taken place. I got into the Y2K mode, and but then I realized that going into US, wonderful place, a lot of people working there, doing great jobs over here. But I realized every individual was working on a particular function or a technology or a process, you know, and then unlike in today's world, everyone wants to be there, doing everything over here,
Like a jack
multitasking.
of all trades, master of none.
Some people become that. Some people are forced into that. So today, even if for we might not say it, but then we are today jack of all trades. But then those days, they were, if I were to again say the same statement, there people used to be master of one. So that's why today when we hear the downsizing of the thing, a lot of people get because in a single process of one particular person is working. So today even the world is moving toward the direction that you have to multitask, not because you have to do overwork, because now every job has become so much integrated because of the use of technology, processes, and everything over here. So even if you have to go in that past, we cannot today, and that is what we have to accept, and that is what we have to explore, and not get exploited in the processes.
I think one of the key learnings here is we are moving towards an integrated world. If you look at, when we are talking about GRC as an example, right? They're talking about integrated relationship, integrated departments, integrated capabilities, right? At the same time, another key learning as I see here is for all the viewers is I've come across many individuals who say that's not my job. That's not my job. I don't want to, look at that. So that's something which I think is not correct looking at the current scenario. And you named it yourself in as many words. Also, one important aspect here is the hype, the part which you just talked about, right? As an example, right? Today there is a hype about, ransomware. There's a hype about threats because people are not able to differentiate whether that threat is actually applicable to you as an organization, right? So there are OEMs, there are vendors who spew out, new marketing jargons, and people get swayed with it. Okay, we'll talk about that a little later. But one important aspect, you talked about Saudi Arabia, you talked about your journey in India, and we also talked about today. Now, how do you keep yourself updated? Because if I remember earlier, even today, newspapers have gone digital, right? So no longer people buy hard copies. But you know, before the internet or when newspapers were not online, the only way to get news was probably to run to your nearest newsstand, pick up the morning news, which was printed as of yesterday. So there was The news was always not current. So something which we
Yeah.
talk about real or near real time now, right? Keeping yourself abreast. There is a lot of RSS feeds coming in. People are talking about hundreds of sites today, which inundate you with tons of information. How do you, as as Naren, keep yourself abreast with what's happening?
I think you already answered within your question itself. Thing, yes, when those days were there, you know, buying newspapers itself was a luxury. If anyone had a newspaper coming in, right? We are from India, so we come from the world of Indian Express, Times of India, Navbharat Times. I'm talking about Mumbai. For there were other similar papers in other cities and states also, So, but then most of the information or most of the news within those were, local newses, some kind of political news, and some entertainment and some little sports, whatever used to happen. I'm talking about whatever I read, because those days, cricket used to be something, entertainment, of course, predominantly movies, right? And then a lot of political news those days, because of, you have emergency and then you have political parties and all. And then, yes, a fair amount of development work that was happening across different industry, but it was predominantly to do with local. And what is my interest in that age? I would only read that if at all I want to do it. But then if you look at those same newspapers, they came up with those, supplementary, magazines in a particular week, which will talk about either sports, or it will talk about, entertainment. It will talk about some jobs. It will talk about, properties. Of course, the part came in later over here. Why did that happen? Because the same newspaper, they wanted to attract different audience, different genre, different age, and different tastes, etc. Because not everyone is going to read the particular. My father used to read by first page. I want to read the page 3, because that is where the actual masala or the juice was. Now, obviously, as the technology evolved, as the world, like you mentioned, became integrated. We became more, global in nature. Likewise, so there were a lot of channels which popped up in India. Newspapers were just 2 or 3, whatever you could hear. But now, because of the advent of technology, you will have now competition coming in. People will share with you information which is not made available by the local newspapers, that will come in over here. And then you have people who will try to, even those days, give fake news also. And then you had this fabricated news, that someone is better than you, someone is greater than you. You means I'm talking about country or as a industry itself. So so news also took its own different meanings and different interpretations, because of this itself. This was one. GRC, when you mentioned over here, again, when you apply to technology, yes, it makes sense. But then, when we talk about the governance, we talk about the, risk, and we talk about compliance. Now, you have a lot of statutory bodies, advisories created to have those, so-called. I'm talking about, when the news is created or news is spread, how much of GRC is used, So these are supposed to be the so-called, frameworks which are supposed to, take care of those, And then obviously when we come into the technologies, you talked about, these security-based companies coming in over here. Now, they are no exception to the rule, right? If technology was evolving so as the programmers and developers are doing it, and some developers, they have, constructive and productive mindset. Someone would have destructive mindset, because if you can program something good, you can program something bad also. And those are the experiments. And then obviously, then they figure out, okay, if I'm able to make something bad, what is that bad? What is the impact, or what is it supposed to do? Is it supposed to shake something else? Today you're talking about cyber crimes, right? But those days it was just malware that, okay, I'm going to delete your data, all those kind of things. So then came the invention of or creation of this so-called antivirus companies, malware companies, and all those things. So they would create a dot and they will create an antidote, not to for wrong reasons, because to see whether a technology which is getting created, which is getting now you know dependent on a lot of data, a lot of information, can that be breached for good reason, bad reason? So that was one of the interests. So imagine, if I were to go back 15 years back or maybe 20 years back, have you ever heard called a certified ethical hacker, right? But today it's a proper course and a study of its own. So yes, when systems are getting created, how do you bring in the risk, or compliance part of it? It's by these itself, So when we talk about the breach of those could be intentional, those could be unintentional. But then that's a separate discussion altogether. But this is what I would see, how things happen or would have happened and will continue to happen.
So now let's look at a little bit from a human perspective, Naren. We are talking about we talked about your journey. We talked about a couple of instances. We talked about how entrepreneurs, individuals, everybody needs to embrace change, keep themselves abreast with what's happening because change is constant. We talked about character strengths. We talked about values like loyalty, honesty. We also talked about, uh, how you need to probably, blend yourself with the emerging world. Um, One thing which, I feel personally, and I would want to understand your thoughts is, I see relationship today being more transactional. Okay, it's basically saying if I don't gain anything from this relationship, I don't want to take it further. So that relation. So when people contact you today, because we live in a highly socialized world, okay, or a social media world, if I have to put it, where they contact you because of the position you hold or probably the chair you are sitting in. What are your thoughts on this?
I think if I were to answer this question, I'm going to get a lot of critics. Uh,
It's a freewheeling thing, and this is the reason the
so I
new
think
generation needs to understand that.
maybe we can rephrase the question. It's not about relationship, and if they don't get anything from me, they would want. I think they are overwhelmed with so many personalities or characteristics, whatever you call it as. Whether be becoming rich, becoming successful, becoming famous. That's one. Trying to do things faster, not wanting to fail, learning from your own experience, and using me as a reference, whether be for a job, whether be for an advice and all those things. So I wouldn't say it is selfish, but it is like because someone else also is in the same race, sitting next to him, yeah, or sitting opposite to him. So it might be because of that also that, while that individual is, probably traveling or running faster than him in whatever that, scenario is, he might say, okay, can I, learn from it, someone else, I sometimes use the, slang over here. Experienced person is one who learn from someone else's experience. A lot of people, they talk about, we are collectively between you and me, for example, we are collective, 70 years of experience. But then for that, I have to sit with you. Right today, when I'm talking about my experience, you can say that, okay, we are, not 70 years, maybe 50 years, because 30 plus yours, and maybe 15 of mine, because whatever my experience, but, is relevant to you is what I can talk about those, So in the process, people, they go to easy, modes to do it over here. Yes, they have platforms which they explore and evaluate, but sometimes, it has to be personal, which they can correlate it. So like I said, it's not, but then yes, it happens. You're right, it happens, and I, going back again those 30, 40 years, I had, 4 friends, and I have those 4 friends even today, I can literally call them and abuse them, whatever we used to do that, And whenever we would meet, we would meet as if, we met, just yesterday, even if I met him after 5, 6 years, because bad thing is that all my four friends are there, they're in four different regions, right? But I have not even shaken hands to all of them since last 6 years. But whenever I talk to them, it starts with a not a hello or a good morning. It starts with a that lal gali word, or a bad word which we use over here. But in today's world, what happens is you have a lot of friends and accomplices, associates, socially, than you have on your professionally also, right? My own LinkedIn contacts would be in the plus of 2,500, same as yours, same as someone who's listening to me. And that's not one platform. You have Facebook, then you have Twitter, right? So in your career and in your life, you start to interact with different set of people depending upon what your genre is. So there, you know, you don't have a true friend. Everyone is a connect to you. Everyone is a relationship, and everyone is relationship. For some reason or the other. So I'll not belittle or demean that, I would say trait or activity of the individual, but it happens. Many times it happens.
So, so let's take that to the next level. So, do you think, are we escaping realism today? The internet is making, because it's an interconnected world, are we losing the personal touch? Okay,
I
you
think,
just mentioned
yeah,
you haven't met your friends, right? So do you think that personal touch is lost? And because that personal touch is lost, the relationships are becoming more transactional.
see those relationships getting lost is twofold. One is if I'm in the same city and in the same location where my friend used to be, that's one connect which I'm looking at, which is more social, which is more personal, right? But I would say, we have hardly 5% personal connects. If someone says, today, if I have say 1,000 connects, whether it be from all these platforms, I would still say it is less than 5%. You have your personal connects. For them, even if you don't shake hands with them, you don't hug them, or you don't interact with them, those will remain. Again, the answer is the same which I said earlier, right? Remaining 95% are your connects which happen on the fly. For example, if I come to your place for a birthday function, right? I'm going to meet 5 friends of yours, and all 5 are from different industries. Someone is from banking, retail, someone, something else. And then, the personalities interact, and then I'm inclined to ask him his contact, or he's inclined to ask my contact. And then the moment we put a contact, there are one thing which gets exchanged is your mobile number, right? And that mobile number automatically brings the WhatsApp along with you. WhatsApp automatically brings in some group or the other, if at all, you are that person over here. Then comes part two. Oh man, he's a CIO in a place, or he is the head of IT, or he is the head of finance, depending upon what is your interest over here. So my next thing would be to, in the evening, go home back, search for Roshan Sequeira. Oh, he's, the GRC champion over there. Man, for him, he's my good connect, and I can sell something to him. I can buy something from him. I can learn something from him, or I can brag about that I know Roshan Sequeira, right? So that becomes your connect. So here, when you mention relationship, right, it's not good or bad. It is how, we create connects. Like I said, so people, if it's your social connect through any of these means, let them be a social connect. I know how many times have we exchanged dinners, feces. I don't think so. We exchange, but how many times we have met? We have met probably 1,000 times. But then what has happened is maybe, you're staying in Abu Dhabi, I'm staying in Dubai. That is one of the biggest problems. Had you been in Dubai, we are in the same place, chances are we would have had a lot of toast and cheers done, right? So I'm saying this is what happens. People go to the clubbings. Now, who meets a friend in a clubbing, and who becomes your clubbing friend, who becomes WhatsApp? So yes, those are connects, but then those are connects for a reason, for a purpose itself, which is not long-lived itself.
Now, the reason I ask this question is because there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of, people try to brag about their connections. People try to think if I have 1,000 LinkedIn followers, then I'm great. The one I'm not trying to, one thing what I wanted to the viewers to understand from this interaction is there are different perspectives of viewing things, right? And one of the perspectives is what you have put up today. Okay. Because another thing which comes to my mind when you talked about this is artificial intelligence, right? So taking it forward, how do you think artificial intelligence is playing a role today? Is it again a hype? As you mentioned, the Y2K hype. Is it something because artificial intelligence has been there for almost 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah.
In the security industry, we have been using it for 20 years almost, or 15 years, right? Um, People talk about chat GPT, but nobody talks about the human mind who has written that chat GPT algorithms. People
Yeah.
talks about the technology. Now, what are your thoughts here, Naren?
Here, like I mentioned, if I'm known by my, connects, that's one way to look at it. But then if I have to say 35 years of experience, the social media coming in, especially LinkedIn coming in almost say 12 to 13 years back in the initial, and now of course it is the de facto platform, right? And at least I can say that I, whatever that 2,500 connects I have today, I know or have interacted or have exchanged, interactions with more than 2,000 odd people, right? Remaining 500 could be the, probably one-timers, who would have either connected or I would have requested connected because I also have needs, right? Like anyone else had. So those 2,000 interactions, when they happened, I met the particular person, knowing the individual interest itself. That's one. And then, if someone is accepting your invite, that means he also is inclined that okay, there is some possibility of exchange. This is professional. Social thing, social thing, the same thing happens over here. Your likes and dislikes itself. Now, when you talked about the artificial intelligence, it is nothing but you know the data which kind of gets created over time across different activities and technologies or happenings. It's what does the data do? The data is supposed to, it was the data was created for doing certain things over here. Now those things are nothing but intents, as an example. And again in the same language, when you say, whether it's chat GPT, you have these large language modules. I'm not talking about new buzzwords, right, which are pertaining to that. So what happens to the data? So the way we behave as humans, now we are trying to bring that so-called intelligence, rather artificial intelligence, saying that okay, I have 2,500 connects, right? What is the intent of that? Is that being known or be bragged about? But at the same time, intent is that okay, if I were to talk to or communicate with GR, say Roshan about say GRC, I know where to go for. So that's one way to look at it. But then if you look at artificial intelligence as a whole, it cannot just do things of its own. You have two layers with built into that. You have the machine learning and you have the deep learning, right? Now, when you look at these two components within the AI, which is the ML and the DL, sorry guys, we are talking technical over here, but then just to say that, because there's a lot of data, what the data is supposed to do, what is the, I would say algorithms which we can bring in if I were to find out, okay, who are the GRC, the people. So obviously it will pick up through my connects, it's there. But then as a whole, when the industry wants to apply, so-called AI for their business outcomes, the same thing happens. They also go and figure out data. So it's all about the data one has or one is sitting on or one wants to play for the better use itself. And when you mentioned the initially that relationship is one, right? So I have other five connects which are also GRC champion, but then I know out of the six people whom I interacted, Roshan is my best foot forward because we have had a couple of shots together. We have worked together. I know Roshan is more accessible. I've interacted more than any of the five. So this is where the things happen over there. This is what my
Because no,
belief.
that brings up a very important point. That's called critical thinking.
Yes.
which I feel is missing today. What is happening is people tend to follow. People don't want to be thinking about it, right? If somebody says something, oh, I'll follow it. And especially if there is an influencer who has got 1,000 followers and he says something, that becomes the gospel truth, right? So that critical thinking mass is somewhere I see getting diluted. You mentioned, how can I use this interview as a from a critical thinking perspective, as an example, to enhance my own career, to enhance my own interaction. That's the point of why we are having this discussion. But somewhere that critical thinking, I feel, is going down, right? People like artificial intelligence. People want some technology to do their job. They don't want to actually understand the why, the what, the where, the whence, and the hows. That thing seems missing. What is your take on this?
So, Roshan, if you recall, maybe a information for the viewers, me and Roshan used to work for one of the organization for almost close to 10 years. Then Roshan decided to part ways. I still continued. One of the tasks internally for me was to, separate the men from the boys, right? How do we do it, So your question, I'm giving you an, example or a analogy or a metaphor, whatever you can say that, I created something called as DFIT. Yeah, DFIT, right? Now, if I say defeat, then there are two parts. One is the fit or defeat. Yeah. But then it's not the way. It was DFIT. D is doers, F is followers, I is innovators, and T is trendsetters, Now, the idea was to really, not categorize people within that defeat framework, but to reward them and award them for doing certain things in certain defined KPIs, right? So then it went on for say a couple of years. And every single month, we had different people achieving different results. I'm talking about sales and also called pre-sales perspective, right? And because you're talking technology, I'll still limit the whole thing, but that applies to almost every different, industry and functions, right? So, like exactly what you mentioned. Now, critical thinker today, you know. For them, it is like I said in the beginning, right? They want to achieve things tomorrow. I don't want to make a very crude statement. A baby takes 9 months to deliver, right? So, for if you're trying to do things which will take its time for you to understand, for you to orient yourself, for you to do perform some hands-on to this, and for you to really measure the outcomes of those. Today, people want to, just come in and hit a boundary or a sixer on the first ball itself. That aggression is good. At least that there's a good part of it. But to expect that if I click my mouse button today and then it does something for me, no, that's not it should be. So the whatever you're taking about the task, it has a journey. It could be a 1 day journey, it could be a 5 day journey. When I say journey means it will take 5 days for you for things to show up. Your part in that is not more than 25%. Individual part is not 20, more than remaining 25% or remaining, sorry, 75% is outside of your control, which is what we are saying that if things have to take say 1 week to happen, you have initiated that thing. Let the remaining 75% happen within that 6 days. Of course, depending upon what the task itself. Now, this part, if people are able to, apply a conscious and a cautious, mind, applying the critical thinking, like you mentioned, they will not succumb or get enslaved to the scenario over here. They can also be, the people, wanted, right? So, for example, if you're taking my interview, saying, okay, what's my experience? Then when they are asked the question about them, then whatever that achievement is that experience of their own? Maybe yes, maybe no. So this is where we're talking about. And biggest today thing is that overwhelming information, overwhelming duplication of information, replication of information, false information. That is one. Second thing is, I want to make it happen immediately. I want to be coming number first. I want to earn more money. So if those whatever task you're taking, take the task with the intent of making it happen rather than just because I want to do it. Do it because you're supposed to do it. Don't do it because you want to do it to probably beat something else.
So a couple of more questions, Naren. Taking that baby example, I like that baby example. I've used that also. So let me map that to something which we have today, the instant culture. Instant noodles, instant outcomes. That is that killing curiosity? Is that killing critical thinking? And the most important thing is it killing common sense?
Whatever I said earlier, I think it's a mix of all these three things. Critical thinking, then instant. What did you say? Instant what?
Instant culture.
Yeah, instant
Instant
culture.
culture,
Yeah,
curiosity, common
yeah,
sense.
and common sense. Of course, common sense. It's well said. Common sense is not common. But the very fact, if someone is, listening to this, you know, for example, if someone is approaching me, that is where he or she thinks that, okay, that's my common sense. Nothing wrong because they are still using that, because if they think that, things have to be done earlier, with your experience or my experience, then why not? Perfectly all right, because he or she they're still achieving the task itself. But then two parts happen. They use that particular sense, right? And then with that you know, uh, instant culture.
Culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And then obviously, critical thinking then is put behind because of the same reason which I talked about over here. So while, for example, when your child comes to you saying that I want to do so and so, he's, using critical thinking because he ran out of thoughts and ideas, right? So that's how children are, they explore and evaluate things on their own when they're stuck. Either they go to their teacher or they come to you, because they are children, right? There. So if in the career, while I might be a mentor to some of the people, I might be a guide to some of the people over here. But guess what? I'm always a student. Even when my son or my daughter they ask me a question, what if I have the answer, I tell them. If I don't have the answer, I'll ask them to explore. But at the same time, because I didn't have the answer, I have to go and find the answer myself, right? Just
True.
because I have the authority to say that, okay, you find your answer, that just cannot take me away from me knowing the answer. Because if my son or my daughter knows the answer, I might as well as I should know also. This I'm talking about when they're asking me the question. Rest, of course, their life is theirs. But if he has come to me, if he's curious on that, if that is the approach any individual is doing it, wonderful approach because they're coming to us for the guidance and experience and for better outcome of what they're trying to do over here, rather than wanting to do because someone I want to beat someone, I want to be successful on those things.
So this is a key learning because I've been a manager. I've also worked under a manager. So what happens is managers today, I'm not generalizing it, but generally, when we look at it, are becoming impatient and they expect, that instant culture that their subordinates have answers for everything. That puts a pressure on the subordinate in order to either please their boss for various reasons. And in turn, it kills curiosity. It kills creativity. It kills, that urge for learning. Because then we have the instant culture. My boss has asked a question, I need to provide an answer, right? And in that turn, that core value of common sense is lost. So that's where I was trying to relate what you're saying. This for me becomes very critical to our viewers also when they're listening to us, right? So as you said, right, your child has done all the homework first. So as an individual, whether we are a manager or whether we are reporting to a manager, we need to do a homework first. Once we have run out of ideas, we need to approach somebody. Either we approach them with different options and take their advice. And even after that advice is given, even if not looking at the instant part, but let's say
Yeah,
the person takes some time, common sense should prevail. Like if this advice is based on some sound footing so those are areas which I feel are getting diluted. I'm not saying no, because I've worked, you probably have worked, you have seen how things are working. So that is very critical, because when we see uh, we have less of leaders today and more of followers. And there's a trend today on LinkedIn which says leaders are toxic. I mean, there is always two parts of the coin, right? Two sides
yeah,
of the coin. So the leader who is toxic to the employees might be, beneficial to the organization.
right.
It's a way of putting things. My final question to you: how do you see your work-life balance from the time you started today? Because that also has probably affected relationship. Now here I'm talking about relationship. You mentioned earlier about your wife patiently waiting for you while you were away on work. We see a lot of marriages going downhill. We see a lot of you know acrimony. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of culture where people are talking about stress. We see a lot of youngsters dying today, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, right? In our age, or probably in our times, somebody having an heart attack was somebody who had crossed 60 or who had crossed their retirement age. Today, everybody has heart attacks. Diabetes is common. Is this related in your opinion to the work culture we are in? Because again, look at HRs today or look at organizations today. There are some countries which have already said 4 days working week. Where are we going today? Are we finally going to come and say 3.5 working days, 3.5 days holidays? I don't know where this is going on. So is technology
It's a
helping us?
very, yeah, no, it's a very sensitive and emotional question, and it's a practical question also. See, work and life balance, again, in my own example, which I talked about, working for 36 hours, 48 hours. Those days, that was the situation. That's one. Second thing is, those days, families used to be, I would say, so-called joint families, not the nucleus family, what it is today. Yeah. And at the same time, that curiosity used to be there, that pride used to be there, by my spouse, whether it be husband or a wife, depending upon. Today, of course, there's no differentiation, right? Today, even I would say, females, they are also equally so engrossed and busy at work, depending whatever the profession is, so compared to what it used to be maybe 30, 40 years, right? Yeah. Now, work-life balance, one has to bring on their own, because how much devotion I'm giving to my work, that's one. But at the same time, how much devotion I want to give it to my family, whether it be parents, if you're not married, or to the spouse, if you're married, and if your spouse is working, then of course, if you have kids, then that mindset, the individual applies over here. Now, whether it be 6 days, whether it be 5 days, whether it be four, whether it be 3 days, if you're whatever the 5 day culture is, right? Are we saying that within the 5 days people are so overworked, right? That they are taking the pressure home? No, I don't think so. It is the individual's personality which puts them in situation of life and death. You talked about heart attacks and all those things, right? Why? Because you heard the term FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, right? They want to be everywhere. They want to be in the clubs. They want to be in the office gatherings. They want to be, learning technology. They want to compete, right? They want to be famous. They want to, make money. They want to possess materialistic thing itself, So the aspirations and ambitions, these are two separate things, right? Aspirations is more towards, career and profession, all those things. But ambitions are ambitions, right? If people take the aspirations, give the advantage to the aspirations than the ambitions, then I think that so-called work and life balance is a perfect meaning to that, because he's spending time on the aspirations. The ambitions are there that I want to, buy a new car or a new house, or I want to go travel and all those things. Ambitions are there, but then, you should give aspirations. The more aspirations you spend, the more sense of achievement you get over here. And chances are that the ambitions will take, that they will remain there. If I'm not able to travel, if I'm not able to buy a better car or a house, it should not be, stress to myself. So where I'm coming from is that, work and life balance is here, not in the number of days, right? For example, if I have to compare the Southeast Asians, or I'm talking about the Europeans or the Northern Americans, they, whether it was 5 days or 6 days, I don't know when they start switch to 5 days, but then even if it's 5 days, after 6 or 5 o'clock in the evening, they don't look at their watch. They don't have watches. They don't look at the mobiles. They don't look at the social media. Even today, I know a lot of my friends, my old buddies from my schools and colleges, they will not respond or they will not pick up because they know that after 5 o'clock, I am supposed to spend time with my, wife or my husband or my children. I want to go and play my evening, squash. I want to watch my favorite program. I want to have a couple of shots, and then I want to do some learning. So that is where that so-called life balance comes in over here, because then you're not no chasing the ambitions. You're spending actual time on yourself. Then so where I was talking about, the wherever you're chasing the materialistic, I would say achievements, whether it be physical, materials, or whether it be, financial, I want to be richer than you. I want to have more bigger salary than you. You are what you will get what you are, right? And if I have to compare, my lot of friends are into business, they might be earning millions, but when we meet, we are in the same, boxers, and we talk the same language, I am not, having the complex that, he's a millionaire. Neither does he has a complex that, he's just a ordinary salaried guy. Now, if like I said, if you have those 5% people connects and 95%, look at those 5% connects. I think you'll be more, I would say, settled in mind, and obviously then awareness are happening, then you're socializing, you tend to eat all out at, because you socialize, you eat wrong things. Those are added to that, you unnecessarily are taxing your body for wrong reasons. So there is a physical stress you're taking, there's a mental stress you're taking. So I wouldn't say that, even if it's 3 days, if imagine if it's 3 days, then are you saying that they're going to be more efficient? No, they're going to be less efficient because now they're spending more time at home. COVID, for example, I might be a bad example to say, I still wanted to go to office because at home, I don't think so I'm working, Like I said, even in today's call, I'm candidly saying that, when I'm on a call, what you're seeing me and what I'm down there, they're two separate personalities, right? But this is more physical appearance. But even mentally and, technically, if I switch off the camera, then I might put on mute. Then who knows what am I doing, what am I thinking? Am I even listening to you also? So these few things are there where, individuals have to, decipher, in their own personalities. You are your own monitor, no one should monitor you. You monitor yourself, whether, are you working? Yes, there might be certain times you overwork for, obviously, if you have multiple work, but then either you have, taken that lot of work on yourself, or you're doing someone else's work, or you don't know how to say no. You don't have to push away the work, but you need to so-called prioritize the work.
I think wonderful speaking to you, Naren. So, to all viewers, let me conclude by saying here is Naren, a friend, a mentor, a, a father, a grandfather, a successful professional, somebody who said that who migrated from India, from one culture, moved into another culture in the UAE. So, what are the key takings from all this? So, what I want to advise the viewers is this is one perspective which we are trying to put as far as Naren is concerned. Our job here is to kindle that critical thinking power within you. View this interview, understand Naren's journey, how he has adapted to change, how he embraced change, how did he use his common sense. End of the day, what is important, viewers, here is your character strengths, the values, truth, honesty, loyalty, love, peace, ethics. This is what will basically distinguish you from the rest of the crowd. We can all be in the rat race, but at the end of the day, as Naren said, there needs to be a balance, work-life balance. Thank you everybody for listening to us. Thank you, Naren.
Thanks,
Nice
Roshan,
talking
and
to you.
thanks, guys, everyone. Just be what you are. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.